Let's go back to another set of assumptions I wanted to challenge just a bit. In the true law of free monarchies, King James I, a century before the founding of the Republic, argued that only a monarch who is responsible to God, not to this being called the people, whatever that is, only a monarch could really protect the interest of all the people, great and small. Why did the founders reject that argument? And I don't want to blame King George. He was a perfectly good monarch. Why did they reject that idea on theory?
They rejected the monarchical idea on theory because of their experiences during salutary neglect. During salutary neglect, everyone had to put in an equal effort so that the colony would survive. And then in America, this created a sense of equality of opportunity and classlessness. We don't have primogeniture like they do in England or law of entail. In America, everyone is equal. Therefore, a monarch is uninherent of the American mindset.
And the biggest difference was that when we were with Britain, we were subjects, but now under our government, we were citizens. And that's why a Republican form was most fit, because we were in equal standing with each other and not constrained by hereditary restrictions.
At the same
No, please go ahead.
At the same time, while a monarchy may be efficient in that respect, the founders quickly learned that a monarchy could easily be abused if it wasn't checked by the people, and they found that a representative Republican form of government was that which is most accountable to the people.
Furthermore,
No, please go ahead.
I would point to the Declaration of Independence, where we see that King George basically controlled the judges' salaries. So in a sense, the colonists, as citizens, feeling themselves as citizens, had no way to redress their grievances.
Talk about trying to take the Roman Republic and moving it forward into the modern era. If you look at, if you trace the decline of the Roman Empire, or the Roman polity, if you will, it was clear that civic virtue began to break down as the economic substructure in Rome began to fall apart. You could argue that in some respects you see the decline of civic virtue in the United States as the economy has gone through its gyrations. You have people leaving foreclosed homes behind, cost gets pushed across to society. How do you balance, or what safeguards do you think Madison anticipated with respect to the balance between civic virtue and natural rights, particularly in a declining economy? Was this something that ever came into his thought?
I believe that the balance between natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism didn't occur to Madison, but more so appeared to Tocqueville when he visited America in the early 19th century in enlightened self-interest. Where in America, we take the self-interest inherent in natural rights philosophy and combine it with the civic virtue of classical republicanism and enlightened self-interest, which says that in order for people recognize that in order for their own pursuits to succeed, America has to succeed.
Also, the recent Pupil shows that 22% of the population believe in the federal government or trust the federal government, and this is the highest low. An NPR article stated that the people's trust in America is usually dependent on how well we're doing in the economy. However, this is not necessarily a bad thing, because our nation was founded on distrust, and our governmental system is structured so that the people is another check against the government. So I don't believe that this distrust that comes with the economy is a bad thing, because it holds the government accountable.
Do we ever get to a point where the mistrust of the government leads us to collapse? And can that be taken too far?
I don't believe that a mistrust in government can lead it to collapse. Perhaps most closely aligned to that will be a mistrust in the judicial branch, because the only enforcement mechanism in the judicial branch is people's respect. And if the judicial branch loses that respect, then it's not going to function as well as the other branches.
I do agree with the premise that a mistrust in government might cause some sort of breakdown within the effectiveness of our government, because I think oftentimes people forget that it's hard to mistrust elective representatives because they do represent the interests of the people who elected them. And there needs to be a balance between this trustee and delegate theory of representation, where these representatives at times must adhere to the interests of their constituents, but sometimes must use their experiences to uphold the common good.
I think there has been a breakdown. For instance, the South distrusted Abraham Lincoln when he was elected, and they basically did not trust the government to actually take into account their interests. So that's why they seceded.
The Constitution says nothing about the importance of public opinion polls to trump to trump the responsibility of elected officials to carry out their duties. Yet you could also argue that this represents the will of the people. Is it possible for a functioning democracy to maintain its ability to execute in a period of the 21st century when technology is so prevalent and public opinion can change by the moment and be reported to their elected officials?
I think this is when it becomes important to make the distinction between how much our government relies on civic virtue. Our government does not rely on civic virtue in the sense that we do not rely on people's civic virtueness when it comes to power. We make checks and balances within our system so that when people try to take power, people block them. However, in terms of getting things done and making public policy, we do rely to some extent on civic virtue. And we can see this in the Senate debate. It took Obama so long to get healthcare passed because of Republican partisanship with the filibuster. So we need civic virtue in terms of getting things done.